Hey everyone, Boardman21 here, and if you're wondering why lumber prices have more than doubled in just the last year alone and why they are at an all-time high, you've come to the right place. Now, if you clicked on this because you were waiting for another Last Epoch video, there will be another one later today, but for now, we're going to talk lumber. Now, many of you that have been following me for a long time know that I work in the lumber industry, and many of you have been asking me through private messages, even in some of my comments, why lumber prices are so high. Before we begin, full disclaimer, I am not a representative of any sort of lumber company or corporation. I'm just a guy who did a lot of research and have talked to a few people who really know what's going on with the prices in the lumber industry. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into it. And to begin, we've got to go back in time. We're going to go all the way back to March 30th of 2020. Now, do you see that price right there? That is the lowest price that lumber had been in a long, long time. It literally came crashing down. So what happened in March of 2020? Well, the entire economy in the US just shut down. Everything was closed for the COVID pandemic, and nobody really knew what was going on, how long businesses and things were going to stay closed down, what was going to be considered essential, what was going to get to actually go to work, who was going to have to stay home. And as that list came out, as precautions came out, as the CDC did their guidelines, as all this stuff was happening, no one in the lumber industry knew if they were going to sell any lumber, who was going to build. Retailers stopped making orders and lumber prices dropped. This led to a lot of mills in the US curtailing and stopping production of lumber, and this set us up for what was going to be an absolute disaster in the following months of trying to get the supply back up to meet the demand that was about to happen. Now, one thing that you will notice very quickly is in this deep crevice of price reduction that it instantly jumped back. And the reason it jumped back instantly is right after all of these mills shut down and curtailed, that all of them were considered essential workers. Construction was considered essential. All these people were at home wanting to do-it-yourself projects and buying lumber. All of this stuff started happening, and all of a sudden you had all these mills that had shut down and the supply dropped, and yet people were starting to buy it really quickly. Now, with everyone buying it to do their fences, their decks, their porches, sheds, new roofs, houses, fences, now, with all of this being done, lumber was selling like crazy, which really lit a fire underneath the mills to get production ramped up. And when I say fires, I mean fires. And this is when the second catastrophe hit. In the summer of 2020, we saw one of the worst fire seasons along the entire West Coast. This is a picture of all the fires that happened in 2020. It was the worst summer ever. Smoke could be seen through the entire US. There were cities that were literally filled with smoke. You could see it from hundreds, if not thousands, miles away. Satellites were picking it up from space. Over 10 million acres were burned. Almost $20 billion in damage was done, and 42 people lost their lives. It was a horrible, tragic summer. Now, how did this impact lumber? Well, it's not just that the trees were burning, but it was the fact that these fires were shutting down logging companies from being able to cut where there weren't fires for risk of another fire being started. The entire state, the entire US's resources were being thinned out to put these fires out. They couldn't risk another fire being started. And so all these lumber mills that were already having a hard time starting back up, people getting COVID, the restrictions, the new policies, now suddenly they were being hit with the fact they couldn't get logs to even produce if they had the people there. And you went through this shortage. You had this huge drop in supply, and demand was ever increasing with all of these people that were doing do-it-yourself projects, making new houses, as all these people had this time to start doing this. And this only got worse when a third ingredient was added into the mix. What do you think the third ingredient was? If you said money, you were correct. Suddenly, the stimulus packages were coming through. Unemployment benefits were being boosted. Now, many people, many people, many families needed this. But there were also a lot of people who didn't, and a lot of people who were using this extra money to now fund projects that they had been wanting to do. And a lot of those projects were do-it-yourself projects. These were projects from building that fence they wanted to do, to remodel a room, to do a shed in the backyard, to build a playset for their kids. All of these things. And yes, I know I'm not going to be on the fence saying that everyone did this. No, there were many families, many of them that needed the money to make it through, that had lost their jobs and needed money. There are also people like me who don't make enough money to fall outside of the people who were going to get stimulus packages, but also didn't really need the money. I was fortunate. I got to keep my job. I got to work through the entire pandemic. I ended up not getting the coronavirus, not yet anyways. I am vaccinated now. But the point is I didn't need the stimulus checks that were coming, and there wasn't one, there wasn't just two, there were three of them. And there were those that were on an unemployment, and there were people that were making more money on unemployment than they were making on minimum wage, and it was allowing a big spur of spending. And it is part of what the government wanted, was to boost the economy during this pandemic. And it did. A lot of spending was happening, and a lot of it was on lumber, and that is the third ingredient that helped start driving prices really high as demand exceeded supply more and more. And those three things hit back to back to back. And by the end of summer in 2020, lumber prices were extremely high, demand was very strong, and supply was very low. Now, you'll notice that the prices did drop. If anyone's ever done research on the lumber market and the lumber industry in general over a long period of time, you know it's very volatile. Prices are constantly going up and down. Every month they go up and down. They can skyrocket, they can plummet, they can do all sorts of things. And during the winter, housing starts kind of slows down, do-it-yourself projects slow down. All of that happened, which allowed for supply to kind of pick up a little bit as demand dropped just a tiny bit, but it was too late. By the time we came out of winter and you got to January, you still had all of this stuff going on. Housing starts were still high, and it just got worse from there. Now your question is today. People have been vaccinated. These mills are running at full production, even more. Some of them are running more than they ever have. And the fires have been put out. Why is it that lumber prices are still going up? Well, demand is strong. Look at these housing starts. You'll notice a trend. Housing starts plummeted when the COVID first came out, when the fires came. And then all of a sudden it took off. And now, last month, the month of April 2021, we had 1.733 million housing starts. That's a record for a long time. It hasn't been that high since 2006. That is a massive number of houses. The demand is very high, and supply just hasn't caught back up yet, and prices just continue and continue to go up. So the next time you're driving around and you've been wondering about lumber prices and you just happen to drive by a lumber plant and you happen to see this, you see lumber stacked high for just hundreds and hundreds of feet, if not hundreds of yards, and there's millions of board feet there, and you think to yourself, wow, they're just hoarding it to raise the prices. That's not true. All of that lumber that you see has already been sold. Literally, orders for that lumber go months out. It's already sold. That mill that's producing it wants to get rid of it. But that lumber that you're looking at that's not wrapped hasn't been dried yet. It's not finished, probably not planed. It still needs to be planed, dried, shipped, and then taken to where it needs to go. All right, that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. Hopefully, you now have an idea. You've been informed on why lumber prices are as high as they are. If someone you know has been asking why they're so high, now you know and you can spread the word. That's it for me. Stay safe out there and have a good day.